Isn't it strange that princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust rings and common people like you and me are builders for eternity? Each is given a bag of tools, a shapeless mass, a book of rules. And each must make, ere life is flown, a stumbling block or a stepping stone. We gather today to celebrate how our dads have been stepping stones for us within our lives. And I hope today, if it does nothing else, is a time of grasping memories again of some of your history and of your experiences with your dad or your grandfather, and how they helped to shape the person you have become. They were stepping stones for you. I think of my own dad. I grew up in, if you're as old as I am, in an age in which the expectations for men and women were very, very clear. We knew what dads did. Dads went out to work and earned the money to try and provide for the family, especially during those tough years of the Depression when I was born. And moms bore the children, reared them in the home, struggled to provide food to put on the table that they could afford, clean clothes and clean diapers for those dirty bottoms, and love which enabled them to grow to become the persons that they might be. It was all pretty clear. Men and women each had their roles, and now the world is turned upside down, isn't it? I was born into a family in which, when I arrived in 1934, my mother had already been told by the bishop that ministers' wives weren't permitted to work. If they did have any time extra after providing for the family, it was to go to support the ministries of their husbands. No work outside the home. My granddaughter, who's a pastor in Northern Illinois Conference, which was my conference, is now the mother of 2-year-old twins. And for the past 2 years, her husband, who is having a tough time finding employment in this economy, has been the stay-at-home dad for those twins. I have to be honest, if you're like me, you'd wonder how well a guy gets along at trying to replace mother, huh? I mean, Mr. Mom is not an easy job to take on. But those twins are beautiful, loving, stimulating, exciting to be with, and they are achieving their full potential by a Mr. Mom in the midst of the role reversal that's going on. So now when we begin to think about what's shaping the lives of our great-grandchildren, we have to be grateful not just for the nurturing of our granddaughter, but of her husband, their father, who is doing the heavy lifting. Life has changed, hasn't it? And yet we find the inevitable truth that every one of us has been loved into life. We arrive born into families with the capacity to be grow into human beings, but unless that is nurtured and developed, we cannot become the full people God has intended for us to be. And it is the love of mothers and dads from the very earliest moments of their arrival that shape the people we become. Those mothers and dads, just as our own, are builders for eternity in the ways in which they shape our lives, and we then reach out to shape others. I think of my dad. I've got wonderful memories of my dad, mostly about how very busy he was as pastor of a church. But he took time to teach me sports. Did yours do that? To throw and catch, learn to play baseball, shoot baskets, throw and catch a basketball? He taught me how to fish, and even more important, where to fish, so you might actually catch something. But my dad was somewhat on the edge of my life. It was my mother who did the most important child rearing in my early years. And in recent years, I've reflected on how she did that. Because when she was in her 90s and I was in my 60s, she in the nursing home was having a conversation with me, and I said, what was it like to try and be a parent during the years of the Depression? She thought for a moment, and then she said, Don, you know, I think the day I found that I was pregnant with you was the worst day of my life. I was glad she waited till I was 60 to tell me that. Otherwise, it might have been a discouraging word, wouldn't you think? But I thought back to her situation. What young mother in those days really could accept with joy the fact you had 3 children under 4 and 2 in diapers? Life was difficult for her. And yet, one of the gifts that she has given to me is that there was never a moment in my life that I did not feel loved and wanted and cherished. She was able to grow past those all too natural feelings of being overwhelmed by the potential demands of rearing small children. And even with today's gadgets, which are so helpful to make life easier, it still is daunting if you've got 3 preschoolers at home all at the same time. And yet, it is those early formative years that shape the people we are. That mother who could have been overwhelmed used to take me for walks, especially after my 2 older siblings were in school and I could get full attention. And she opened doors of wonder for me in the whole world of nature, taught me about flowers and the names of so many of them, of the trees and the kinds they were. She taught me the miracles of reading and poetry, and how imagination can set you free to be at a different place and time. She was the first one to open the windows of my imagination. And then there was my dad. Gave me my first music lessons. He was the one who brought music into our home, which had been so terribly important for me. I can remember when I was growing up, we had a month's family vacation together. And yet, during my growing years, he took almost every morning we were on that vacation to go into his study and work. And we could hear the typewriter clattering. And I resented that for a long time. Family vacation, and my dad wasn't there. And it was only afterward that I realized that that time was a gift to me and to my siblings, because it was the extra income he could earn by writing books and having them published, that brought in the trips, the summer camp, the music lessons, and then later paid a chunk of my college tuition so that I could go to the school of my choice and graduated debt-free. Imagine that. That which I thought was depriving me was another special but unrealized gift that unlocked my future. I don't know what Father's Day is going to mean for you this year. I hope it's a rich time of memory when you begin to reach back and grasp again, not just what Dad did and gave to you, but how the love of my mother supported him to make that possible. And how my mother was also the one who made such huge contributions. And we remembered her last month, didn't we? But that's just the first step. The second step is the so what. So what do we do when we make that rediscovery of the gifts that we've received from the past? And of course, those stepping stones we know came not just from mothers and dads. If you're like me, you have a long list of people who were transforming agents in your life. There were grandparents and aunts and uncles. There were teachers in school. There were those within your church or your church family who taught Sunday school or had the junior choir. There were the scout leaders and the coaches. And later on, there were professors in university and graduate school who unlocked the doors of possibilities for the gifts that you had and the life that you could live. And then, of course, there's that whole world we take for granted. Are you touched by the magic of music and how it's performed? You ever think of that as a gift to you? Is your life enriched? Do you have stepping stones because of the way your life and your imagination has been enriched? How about the books that set your imagination going? That get you away from the tough times and place you in a different world? Think of our country, think of its founders and their gifts to us, their sacrifice that we created this land of freedom that we enjoy. And those who have served as its leaders through the years. Think of the young men and women who went into military service and have given up their lives for us. We've received a lot of stepping stones, some big, some smaller, but added together, they have created the future in which we live and the people that we've become. But so what? What are we going to do with that? That's where I like this second text. Surrounded as we are on every side by witnesses of people who have loved us and cared for us, our responsibility now is to run with perseverance the race set before us. I love that image of a relay race. Isn't that what we're in? We're in a relay race. And some of us are about closing down on the lap that we're running. And believe me, I see that when I have a daughter and granddaughter in ministry. And I say, maybe I can't do it anymore, but I'll pass the torch. And there are others carrying it into the generation of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Well, how about today? Today, whatever your age or life situation, is God's gift to you. You're here only because of the investment and sacrifice of countless people, known and unknown, that are making your life possible right now. What can you do to say thank you for what you've received. Sometimes, because of our limited circumstances, all we can do is to be the kind of people who with courage accept what life has given us and give to our children the example of courage and integrity that we can prevail no matter what life brings. And sometimes to our spouses, to our children, to those we touch as neighbors, we can say those words, I love you. I care about you. We can ask those questions. How is it with you? I mean, really, how is it with you? Not just what you think I want to hear, but what you need to share. And as we do, we are creators of more stepping stones for the lives of others. Isn't it strange that princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust rings and common people, you and me, we're builders for eternity as we pass the torch that we have carried. Thanks be to God. Make this a wonderful Father's Day.